Hello and welcome to Notes on Jodo Shinshu Pure Land Buddhism, Episode 1. What is Pure Land Buddhism? Because if you came to this video, you probably want to know what Pure Land Buddhism is. And so it's my pleasure to explain it in this short video. The first question we have to ask though is, what is Buddhism? I know it seems obvious, but maybe you know, or you maybe think you know, but you really don't know. So I'm not going to assume anything here and just explain a little bit about what Buddhism is. And what Buddhism is it originated with Sakyamuni Buddha on this earth planet 2,500 years ago. And the roots of Buddhism are in Hinduism, which is the world's oldest religion. So Buddhism actually came from Hinduism. Hinduism was already established in India. And so in India, there was Hinduism, and then it branched off into Buddhism with Sakyamuni Buddha. And so, following that, Buddhism and Hinduism have some similarities, but they're not actually the same religion. So they parallel each other in some ways, but the doctrine is totally different, the texts are totally different. For the most part, the texts are totally different, and pretty much everything is different about both of them, but I mean they share some common ground. Okay, so therefore Buddhism is the teachings of Sakyamuni Buddha, and so that is what Buddhism is. The next question you have to ask then is, who was Sakyamuni Buddha? That seems to be the next logical step here. And so Sakyamuni Buddha was a historical, real-life Buddha that lived in India 2,500 years ago. So he was real, and he was born in India 2,500 years or something ago. Okay, and he was born as Prince Siddhartha Gautama, and he lived a lavish lifestyle destined to be king. So the lifestyle of the Prince Gautama was probably more lavish than pretty much anyone living today. Anyone, Bill Gates or any rich guy you can think of, probably 10 times more lavish than that. However, there was something plaguing the prince, and so he feared the impermanence and questioned the purpose of his life. So he feared the impermanence of life, and he questioned his own purpose of life. He thought, oh, well, life is not about wealth. It's not about fame. It's not about fortune. It's not about being successful in doing XYZ. He questioned all that, and he reflected in himself, and he thought about that very deeply. And so once he came to this sort of pathway in his life, he renounced all his treasures and sought enlightenment. So he gave up everything. He gave up his fame, he gave up his fortune, his women, his everything. He also had a wife and son as well. He gave that up too. And so he resolved to seek enlightenment. And Sakyamuni Buddha achieved enlightenment at the age of 35, and he continued his teachings until he died at the age of 80. And up to today, his teachings have been transcribed by his disciples, and they amount to over 7,000 or something, probably more than that, volumes of sutras today. So there are many sutras. They were all recorded by his disciples, and the teachings of Sakyamuni Buddha were first recorded in some Indian language. I think they ended up in Sanskrit eventually, and then they were transported to China, where they were translated into Chinese, and then from China they were transmitted to Japan. So the historical significance of that is as such. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the sects of Buddhism very briefly here. And so the major branches of Buddhism are the Mahayana sect, or the Mahayana branch, I should say, Theravada and Tibetan. And from there, these branches split off into different sects, such as Zen, Pure Land. There's other sects. There's many different sects of Pure Land Buddhism, and different denominations too. Okay, and so Pure Land Buddhism itself is part of the Mahayana branch of Buddhism. Okay, and all the sects are completely different. I should say some of them are different, some of them are similar, but overall all the sects and all the branches of Buddhism have to have some sort of grounding in the teachings of Sakyamuni Buddha, or else it really can't be considered Buddhism at all. So that's really the common thread among all the branches and all the sects. All the sects, again, are completely different from each other and yet share some similarities. There are some similarities, not very many. For example, in Pure Land Buddhism, I believe, you know, the main focus is Amida Buddha, whereas I don't know too much about Theravada, but I know Theravada does not really, they don't really focus on Amida Buddha. So that's one of the differences. There are many differences, of course. Probably one of the biggest differences are the texts that come across, the Buddhist texts that are required for study in the doctrine. Okay, so now we're getting to the point where we have to discuss what Pure Land Buddhism is. And so Pure Land Buddhism is one of the major sects of the Mahayana branch of Buddhism, okay? It's based on the three major sutras of Sakyamuni Buddha: the Sutra of Infinite Life, the Amida Sutra, and the Contemplation Sutra. These are known as the Pure Land Sutras. So these three sutras are known as the Pure Land Sutras, okay? And the content of these three sutras form the basis of Pure Land Buddhism. So Pure Land Buddhism itself is based on what's in these three sutras, or the basis of these three, or what's the basis of these three sutras, okay? The central focus of Pure Land Buddhism is Amida Buddha and his primal vow, or it's otherwise called the 18th vow, which we're not going to really get into in this video because we're not really looking to answer that question. But its focus is Amida Buddha and the 18th vow, which is the primal vow, which there are many vows. There's 48 vows, but this is the 18th one. Okay, and the purpose of Pure Land Buddhism, because many different religions have different purposes, and so the purpose of Pure Land Buddhism itself is to achieve liberation from samsara, which is the cycle of birth and death. Because in Pure Land Buddhism, when you die, it's believed that you are reincarnated somewhere, or you're reborn somewhere, okay? And so this rebirth process, whether you're born in hell or some other realm, or as another human, or as another being, this process of birth and death is what we're looking to get liberated from. And that's really the goal of Pure Land Buddhism. And be born into Amida's land of utmost bliss, which is also called the Pure Land, where you'll resolve to achieve Buddhist enlightenment of the highest possible level, or the 52nd level. So there's 52 levels of enlightenment. The highest is Buddhist enlightenment, or what's called nirvana. Okay, so that's the goal, the ultimate goal of Buddhism, is to achieve this nirvana and resolve to become a Buddha. How to practice daily Buddhism? This is really a question that I get pretty often. Even I ask this question myself many times in the past, but never really got a strict answer to it. So I'm just going to throw some ideas out there. You don't have to do all these ideas. You can do some or all, or maybe do your own ideas. But generally speaking, this is what I have done in the past, or what I have been advised to do. So I feel that this list is good, is a good starting point for your own Buddhist practices. Because if you say you convert to some religion, for example, the next question is, what do I do? How do I practice that religion? What are the next steps to take? And so the first real thing that I can think of is chanting, or otsutomi. Okay, chanting is basically chanting a sutra, for example, the Amida Sutra, or chanting Shoshinge, which is Shinran Shonin's hymn of true faith. So that is one way you can possibly practice daily Buddhism. Some people practice the Shoshinge in the morning, followed by the Jodo Wasan, and then at night they practice, or they chant Amida Kyo, or the Amida Sutra. Okay, so different people do it differently, mix and match. Some people chant for 2 or 3 hours. Other people can't afford that time, so they chant for like 20 minutes or something. So it's all up to the individual. The 6 parameters. Okay, the 6 parameters are generosity, ethics, patience, perseverance, concentration, and wisdom. And so the practice of these 6 values constitutes practice of the 6 parameters. So so that's also another way you can possibly practice Buddhism or Pure Land Buddhism. And so practicing, it's said that practicing one of these 6 parameters will lead to the practice of all the 6 parameters. So you can possibly practice these in your daily life, and you don't have to buy any books or do anything out of the ordinary. You can practice these 6 parameters right now. Who doesn't practice generosity? Who doesn't practice ethics? Who doesn't practice concentration or patience? I mean, you're pretty much doing that right now. You just have to step it up a little bit. The third thing that I can think of is a recitation of the Nembutsu, or Namo Amida Butsu. This was suggested by previous masters of Buddhism, such as Nagarjuna and Vasubandhu, and basically what this is the contemplation of Amida Buddha and reciting the Nembutsu with true faith. And so this concentrated recitation, or it's what's called the Nembutsu meditation, they call it also, is also another possible way to practice daily Buddhism. Reflection is also another one, reflecting on yourself, reflecting on certain events that happen, reflecting about the nature of the events, because Buddhism is all about cause and effect. So Buddhism in general is about cause and effect, and so reflecting on different sort of events that happen, different actions that you've taken, actions that other people have taken, why they took those actions, where these actions are headed. This sort of reflection is also the practice of Buddhism, or a possible way to practice Buddhism. Meditation, we mentioned this earlier, Nembutsu meditation, it's called. There's other forms of meditation. There's reflection meditation too. There's many different kinds of meditation that you can practice. Awareness in the self. This is probably one of the most important aspects. If you don't practice any one of them, you should probably practice this one, because this is the most important. And so Buddhism is all about reflection, self-reflection, and the self. What we have to arrive at is that we have to understand the self. So studying Buddhism is sort of like looking into the mirror and seeing yourself, but in a different light. So this awareness and the self type of thinking is really critical. And if you don't practice any of these, I suggest you practice this one. This is probably one of the most important, probably more important than reading any text, reading any doctrine, or anything of that nature. Okay, and finally, reading of sutras or Buddhist texts. I do recommend this, but only once you've understood like the very basics of Buddhism, because it's easy to get lost in doctrine. It's easy to get lost in the whole flow of things. So it's really essential that you understand the basics of Buddhism. What are the key parts? It doesn't take too long to understand the basics of Buddhism, and so it's better to understand the basics of Buddhism first, and then read your sutras and Buddhist texts, and then look to expand your knowledge. So I would suggest that as a last thing. Once you've exhausted, like once you've learned like pretty much the basics of Buddhism, then you can kind of do that. That's what I would suggest anyway, and that's how I started myself. And so that's it pretty much. Those are the basics of Buddhism. Well, that pretty much answers the question about what Pure Land Buddhism is. I also answered the question of what Buddhism is in general, and how to practice Pure Land Buddhism. So that is it for this episode, and hope to see you again soon.